All right, welcome. Today we're getting into what I like to call the architectural blueprint for any great app or website, the Mid-Fidelity Wireframe. Now this is a super important step, but it's one that a lot of people skip over. So let's dive in and see why you absolutely shouldn't.
So, let's start with a really big question. Why is it that so many digital products, apps, websites, you name it, they launch with all this hype and promise, and then they just fizzle out? The market is just littered with them.
And, more often than not, the reason is surprisingly simple. They tried to build a house without a blueprint. They just jumped straight from a napkin sketch right into coding or making things look pretty. And that, my friends, is a classic recipe for disaster.
And that's exactly where our solution comes in. The Mid-Fidelity Wireframe is that essential blueprint. It's the critical bridge that takes you from a fuzzy, vague idea to a clear, visible, and, most importantly, a testable plan.
So what is it exactly? Well, a mid-fidelity wireframe is basically a structured black and white layout of your product. Its whole purpose is to get you to focus on the absolute fundamentals. What's the content? How will people interact with it? And what's the most important thing on the screen?
Let's break down what really makes it tick. See, unlike a messy sketch, it has a clear structure. It's detailed enough that you can actually put it in front of real users to test. And the focus here is on real content, all presented in grayscale, and it's built to be interactive.
And why is this such a big deal? Well, because this is the stage where you catch the big problems. You take your vague ideas and you make them concrete. You spot confusing flows, and you get to test your content before you've spent a ton of money on visual design and coding. Look, fixing a problem here is cheap. Fixing it after you've launched is incredibly expensive.
And this table really shows the jump, doesn't it? You're moving from just rough shapes to actual structured components. You're ditching the placeholder lorem ipsum text for realistic content, and you're going from a vague concept to something you can actually test. It's a huge leap in clarity.
All right, let's dive into our first big pillar, structure. We're going to see how this is built, and maybe more importantly, why it's so critical to build it in just black and white.
I know what you're thinking. Why grayscale? It seems a little counterintuitive, right? I mean, why would you limit yourself when the final product is going to be full of color? Well, it turns out there's a really powerful strategy behind this.
It's all about focus. When you strip away the color, you strip away all the distractions and arguments that come with it. You force everyone, the designer, the client, the user, to focus on what truly matters at this stage: the structure, the layout, the hierarchy. You're not debating shades of blue, you're figuring out if the whole thing even works.
And look, grayscale isn't just one boring, flat color. You use different shades strategically to communicate what's important. Darker elements, they grab the eye. Those are your main buttons and actions. Lighter elements are secondary. It's all about using contrast to guide the user's attention on purpose.
And this all boils down to a really powerful design principle. If your design is clear, logical, and easy to use when it's just black and white, then adding color later is only going to make it better. But color can never, ever fix a broken structure.
Okay, so we've got our structure down. Now for the second pillar, and this one is just as important, the words. Because at this stage, the text you use isn't just some placeholder, it is the design.
This is a whole field called UX writing, and it's all about choosing the absolute best words to guide users, to cut down on their confusion, and to help them get things done. I mean, good UX writing builds trust and makes a product feel totally effortless.
So the number one rule here is that clarity always wins over being clever. A button that says, "Let's do this," might sound kind of fun, but what does it mean? Create account, on the other hand, tells the user exactly what's going to happen. No guesswork needed.
And the second principle? Be concise. You have to respect your user's time and attention. Why on earth would you use 7 words when one will do the job perfectly? Continue is direct, it's efficient, and it gets the job done without any of that extra fluff.
And this extends to a few other key ideas, right? Every single word should be useful. Your language needs to be consistent everywhere in the product. And this is a big one. You have to speak the user's language. Avoid all that internal, technical jargon that they're never going to understand.
You know, a really great design doesn't just plan for the perfect scenario, what we call the happy path. You have to think about everything else. What does the screen look like when it's loading, or when it's totally empty for a new user? What happens when something goes wrong? Thinking through all of these different states is what separates a good experience from a really frustrating one.
So, you've built your grayscale structure, and you've written clear, concise copy. But how do you actually know if it works? Well, the final, crucial step is to put that blueprint to the test.
And this is so important to remember. The goal here is not to ask people if they like the design or if they think it's pretty. You are testing one thing and one thing only. Is it usable? Can people actually do what they need to do with it?
This is your chance to get answers to the questions that really matter. Can a user complete a task from start to finish? Do they actually understand what that button does? Where are they getting stuck or confused? This kind of feedback is pure gold, and you're getting it way before you've committed to a final visual design.
Which brings us to our conclusion, to the big takeaway here. If there's one thing you remember from all of this, let it be this. Mid-Fidelity wireframing is not some optional, nice-to-have step. It is the unskippable step.
And I'll leave you with this final, critical thought. A beautiful user interface cannot fix a confusing user experience. If your users are lost and confused in the simple grayscale blueprint, no amount of pretty colors or fancy animations is going to save it. Get the blueprint right, and you are building on a rock-solid foundation for success.
Like, share, and subscribe.